both members of the Hall of Fame. There is 3 players on the 51 team that are in the Hall. And Joe Zeno is also in the Hall. So there was 4 of us in the class of the 51, which is pretty remarkable. After my senior year, we were down in the cafeteria where we all sat, and our friend Sally Leone came in and said, "I just got word that I have to go in the Marine Corps." I said, "What are you talking about?" He says, "You're only in high school." He played the trumpet in the reserves, and he was a lousy trumpet player. I don't know how he get in. But anyway, we talked about it, and we said, okay, let's join. This was in January or February. We went up to see Dr. Kelly, and we made arrangements that if we took our classes before we went in, we could graduate, which we did. There was probably about 10 of us. The one guy who didn't want to go in the Marines is Bob Kellen. Bob said, "I'm going in the Air Force." I said, "Why don't you go with us?" He said, "No." He said, "I want a clean uniform and a clean bed. You guys can do what you want." Well, Bob went in the Air Force. He was a military policeman, come out, joined the police department. He said, "John, why don't you join with me?" I said, "No." I said, I've had enough of guns. So Bob went, spent almost 40 years in the police department, and he became chief of police of Watertown. So he did pretty good. Joining the Marine Corps, it's really something. We went down, we boarded a train from South Boston, went down to Beaufort, South Carolina. And on our arrival there, we met a big Southern boy who was a career Marine, which is the worst you can get. He was our DI. He said to me, pointed to me, and he said, "Count the men, count the boys." I counted 4 times, and I come out with 48. He said, "That's wrong." I said, "No, it's 48. Well, he said, "Where are you from?" I said, "I'm Boston." He said, "You know something? I hate people from Boston and New York. You're all punks." And he gave me a whack in the head. I said to myself, this guy doesn't even know me, and he hates me already. He became my DI, and we went through extensive training, 9 weeks of extensive training, and 2 weeks in California in the high Sierras for winter training. The Marine Corps was taking massive casualties in Korea at that time, so our training was really pushed ahead. So we landed in Korea, and from there, we landed in North Korea, way up in Sochuri. Very cold, very cold. And we got into one of our centers in a staging area, and at that time, we just had our boots. They were like, they were leather and rubber, and they had felt inside of them. And when they get wet, your feet froze. And they were having tremendous problems with frostbite. All of a sudden, they brought in these new boots, and they were affectionately called the Mickey Mouse boots. Thermal boots that probably saved many lives after that. And stamped on the box was, "Made in USA, hood rubber, Watertown, Massachusetts." I was a hero for about 5 minutes with the guys, if you know what I mean. But 50 years later, it really didn't do me any good because I still can't walk barefooted on my feet because of the frostbite. When we were there, we had, I'm not going to even read this because I got to go from the hat. This is going by, I get all mixed up. But one of my friends, in my junior year, there was my friend, we are going back to notes. Jimmy Sears. Jimmy Sears played a guard when I was a junior. And after the season, I didn't see him. And later I found out that he moved to Belmont. The next year, my senior year, on the Watertown and Belmont Thanksgiving game. There in front of me was Jim Sears. And we just looked at each other and we really laughed. We won 25-0. The next time I saw Jim was in Korea. He came into my company from Okinawa. They were bringing a lot of men because we had lost a lot of guys, so he was one of the replacements, as I was when I went there. One night, Jimmy said to me, "John, I got to go on the outpost." And I said, "I've been out there." I said, "I got hit once out there." I said, I don't want to go out again. I said, "I'm going home in a couple months." He says, "Well, Lieutenant said you got to bring me out there, my squad out there." He says, "because you know where it is." So reluctantly, I volunteered, which I didn't volunteer. They told me to go. I brought him out, he and the squad out there. I brought up a machine gun for covering fire. Without going into a lot of specifics, I get wounded. That was my third time. They brought me back, and at that time, President Eisenhower gave an edict saying anybody with 3 Purple Hearts would immediately come home, which I did. In another month and a half, I was sent home. After the Marine Corps, 6 months after the Marine Corps, I got discharged. I married my sweetheart, high school sweetheart, Betty Nell. I was sitting there with my family, which for many years after I get out of the service, put cold towels on my head because of all the stuff that happened. But she's my love of my life, and I thank her for it. We have 4 children. We have Doreen, Leslie Jean, John, and Chris, who are sitting here saying, "Dad, don't screw up, will you please?" And we also have 10 grandchildren, which are the love of our lives. It's nice being a grandparent because when they cough, you go home. That's the beauty of it. But we've got some great people, great children, and they've been really fantastic to us. In closing, I would like to talk about 2 people in my life, my young life, 2 immigrants from Greece who came over very young to America for a better life, which were my parents. They met, they had 7 children, Ted, myself, George, Elaine, Joy, Dottie, and Harry. 7 lovely children. My parents, all they did was work for their children. That was their being. And I always think of my parents getting 3 telegrams from the State Department saying, "Your son has been wounded," didn't give any specifics. And I'm wondering I wonder how they felt. The third time, a lieutenant colonel came to my home in Arsenal Street in Watertown and said, "Your son is coming home." Usually when an officer of that caliber comes to your house, it means your child has been killed. But for me, I was alive and I was coming home. So to my parents, who must have went through hell to have a son being wounded, getting these telegrams, to James and Aditi Vlachos, who were buried out of this church. My father 3 years ago, my mother a couple months ago. I dedicate this trophy that I have here